Hello, my name is Laurie Beckoff. This is my 7th time, magical, presenting here at Chestnut Hill, and I'm also the communications coordinator this year. And my topic today is the somewhat narcissistic, all with flaming red hair, Harry Potter and the magical redhead tradition. So for a young redhead growing up reading the Harry Potter series, it was impossible to not be extremely excited about the fact that there was an entire slew of redheaded characters, major redheaded characters. Redheads are only 1 to 2% of the global population, but we do frequently appear in arts and media because of the uniqueness of that hair, which leads to its treatment as either special, suspicious, or stigmatized, like many other minority identities, and it's also much more commonly treated as an identity than other hair colors. Either way, redheads are bound to stand out, and that makes them convenient stand-ins for any kind of identity, connotation, stereotype, association, whether that's going to be positive or negative. But with so many distinct redheaded characters in Harry Potter, red hair doesn't mean just one thing, but it's mentioned so many times that it clearly does mean something, or perhaps many things. So, first question I have, how much red hair is there in Harry Potter? Would anyone like to venture a guess as to how many times red hair is mentioned or referenced? 7 books across them. Okay. Oh my God, okay, calm down, people. Okay, well now the number doesn't sound impressive because everyone went so big. It's about 56 throughout the 7 books, depending on exactly what you count, and we'll get into what you count. So usually it's specifically red mentioned, sometimes described as flaming, bright, or vivid, and frequently mentioned alongside freckles. We do have auburn for one character in his younger years. Anyone remember who that is? Dumbledore. And dark red specifically for another character. Lily, yes. There's also one non-human redheaded character. Yes, Ronan the Centaur. But none of these characters are ever, there's also one next generation character, Lily Luna Potter, Harry and Ginny's daughter, and then of course all the Weasleys. Ginger is never used to describe any of them, actually. It is used as a pejorative term of address for Ron, but it's never said his ginger hair. Ginger is used for a few other characters. Does anyone guess who the ginger characters are? The ginger cat, Crookshanks is one, frequently described as ginger. There's also Mundungus Fletcher, not particularly flattering character. Slughorn's mustache in his younger years is gingery blonde. Hepzibah Smith has a ginger wig. And there's also reddish blonde hair for Marietta Edgecombe, who sells out Dumbledore's army. So, there's also one other mention of Teddy Lupin's hair has maybe turned ginger in the last hour as a baby. So ginger seems to be, it's an identity for someone like Ron, described as, hey, ginger, but the hair itself always specified as red. So let's look at these redheads in particular and the wealth of different personalities we get from them. So first, of course, we have the 9 Weasleys, loving mother and father Arthur and Molly. Arthur's also obsessed with muggles. He's a devoted civil servant. Molly is a fiercely protective mother. Bill, he's cool. We hear about him first off as being head boy. He's a Gringotts curse breaker. Charlie was a Quidditch captain and now a dragon handler. Percy was a prefect who becomes head boy. Ron notes that Fred and George get into a lot of trouble, but everyone thinks they're really funny and they also get good grades. And so Ron feels like with all of this, he has a lot to live up to, but anything he does isn't impressive because everyone's already done it. But we see he's a loyal best friend. He's a pretty good wizard. He gets basically the same grades as Harry, and he becomes an athlete too. Ginny starts off shy little sister, turns into a great athlete and romantic interest. And then of course we have Lily, the ultimate self-sacrificing mother, and Dumbledore only in his younger years we hear was auburn. And I always wonder, is there something about that, about his, a hint of his scandalous past maybe, that he had been a redhead, but not anymore. Now he's calmed down a little. It's an interesting point to think about. So now I want to see how these compare to other portrayals of redheads throughout history, and these are the 3 main sources I used. There are not a ton of books about the portrayal of red hair, but I used A Vindication of the Redhead, the typology of red hair throughout the literary and visual arts, Red, A Natural History of the Redhead, and The Roots of Desire, the myth, meaning, and power of red hair. Very rude out there. Please excuse the lawnmower. So, without roasting me, please, what associations does anyone have with red hair? Temperamental. Irish, what else? Temperamental. Any others? Brave. Brave? Okay. Oh, okay. Not too bad. I'm not Irish. So let's look at some of the common ones. An early one is being evil. It's associated with hell, Satan, the devil, especially Lilith, the first wife of Adam, is who was like demon associated, often portrayed with red hair. So is Judas, which gives this idea that redheads are traitors. And I think Harry Potter engages with that one quite interestingly, because obviously we get off the bat, the redheads are not evil. Every single major redhead is on the side of good. We can debate whether Dumbledore is manipulative and that Percy, sides with the Ministry for a while, but overall, redheads are good guys here. So we've escaped that stereotype. Traitors, the Weasleys are called traitors, but only by the antagonists, only by people like the Malfoys, because they're blood traitors. And in this case, it's a subversion of the trope, because being a traitor is good. They are traitors against a tradition that is steeped in prejudice and bigotry. So they can proudly wear that label of so-called traitor. Another one that sometimes is also negative, though not quite as evil, is just being an other. Because redheads are a minority, there's something strange and different about them that often makes them undesirable. One of the common historical associations in medieval Europe was with Jews. I happen to be a redheaded Jew myself. So there you go, that apparently red hair does actually occur a little more often, especially did then, among, okay, we have a reprieve slightly. Red hair does occur somewhat commonly among Jews, and that has made that association. Shylock has often been portrayed with red hair, and it's usually a negative for this kind of othering. Now, the Weasleys I find interesting here because as purebloods, they would technically qualify as members of the privileged wizarding elite, but they willingly sacrifice that status in favor of their own values. They prefer acceptance and hard work and family. They don't need to be one of these fancy, so privileged they don't even have to work families because they choose different values in their lives. Arthur has his fascination with muggles. He cares about their rights. He devotes his life to working an unglamorous and underpaid government job, to help them. To the Malfoys, red hair and freckles themselves are not necessarily cause for loathing, that, oh, those are those people who are different than us, but they are indicators of being part of that family with undesirable associations. The whole red hair and hand-me-down robes, you must be a Weasley, red hair, freckles, and more children than they can afford, or in a Harry Potter musical, red hair and a stupid complexion. On the other hand, for the Dursleys, they see Weasleys as the other because for them it's that disruptive redheaded family who comes bursting into their fireplace. Now I'm looking at the nice fireplace in this very room. You can envision it. A bunch of redheads bursting into the fireplace, disrupting the nice, beautiful, clean house of the Dursleys. So it's an other to them, as is Lily Potter, having been Petunia's sister, who to her was a freak. Speaking of freaks, the next point I want to see is nonconformity. Now, Lily Potter was a freak to her own non-redheaded, non-magical sister, but a filthy muggle to wizard supremacists. But this nonconformity, which is sometimes seen as negative, I think for the Weasleys is a positive, and has been portrayed as a positive more often in some more modern media with someone like Pippi Longstocking. She's fun, she's spunky, she doesn't follow the rules. And that's what the Weasleys do too. They don't follow the rules of wizarding society because they actually care about muggles. We also have things like Fred and George. They're fun rule breakers. They don't want to have normal jobs. They're not going to finish school. They're going to create their own business. And that's exciting. Ginny has her own rebellious streak. Anything's possible if you've got enough nerve. So this is a slightly more modern association that Harry Potter does continue and is a good one to have. Another common one, especially in Victorian literature, is orphans. This makes the redheads stand out more because they don't have that lineage of maybe other redheads in their family, knowing where they even got these genes. But Harry Potter definitely goes against this one because we have a whole big happy family of redheads that really serves as a surrogate family for Harry. And particularly interesting because his magical mother was a redhead. So we really get that sense of them being stand-ins for his family, and red hair being symbolic of family in this series. Sexuality. This really only pertains to women. Redheaded women have generally been portrayed, like Lilith, as extremely sexual, either sexualized or hypersexual themselves. Now, and redheaded men, on the other hand, undesirable. Geeky, wimpy, just not a desired partner the way that redheaded women would be. But I think Harry Potter mostly goes against this. Most of the characters we see who are redheads are male. The ones that we do see that are female, we have two mother figures in Molly and Lily. And then Ginny kind of grows into the romantic figure. She's not initially that, though we do hear that she has an active dating life, and her brothers get a little judgy about that, so maybe a little bit of that trope there. But I also think that we have to give some credit to all the male characters, some of whom are quite desirable, most notably Bill, portrayed as cool. He's got long hair, and he ends up with fleur de la cour, shown as the epitome of beauty. So I think we're mostly safe on this stereotype here, with just a little bit of, yeah, the romantic interest is a redhead. She's real pretty, and we hear a lot of descriptions of her hair in Half-Blood Prince and her long mane of hair dancing behind her. So it definitely does seem to be attractive. Another one that is definitely true in the series is that association of fiery. Someone mentioned temperamental. We see both positive and negative fieriness, I think. We have Molly Weasley, who has quite a temper, but it's also a temper about making sure her kids are safe, whether that's because how dare you steal that car, or because Bellatrix Lestrange is threatening her children. There's a comparison I always find interesting of Molly Weasley going up against Bellatrix Lestrange. The first time I read A Tale of Two Cities, I thought it was really interesting that Miss Pross, who is the caretaker of Lucy Manette and described as big red-headed woman, is very physically powerful and really out to protect Lucy, and specifically goes up against Madame Defarge, the evil woman who sends people to the guillotine. And I've always thought that was an interesting juxtaposition, this dark woman against the red-headed protector of her, if not literal child, and someone who is a child to her. And that fiery temper and fiery sense of protection here is a good thing. We also have that all of the redheads in Harry Potter are Gryffindors, the house of nerve and daring and chivalry. We have someone like Ron, who tends to have a temper that he sometimes takes out on his friends, but also sometimes uses to defend his friends and get thrown in detention for them. Fred and George get into a fight with Malfoy and get banned from Quidditch. So we really see a pretty broad spectrum of fieriness, I think, through just about all of these characters. The last one I want to get to, which is really sort of my main point, oh, I also should mention, I forgot Ginny and her bat bogey hex. That's a big one, too. Then the last point I want to get to that will mostly be the focus of the rest of this presentation is the supernatural. So this is the one thing that all of the redheads in Harry Potter have in common, besides being Gryffindors, we have that too, but they're also all magical. They're wizards. Now, the Weasleys are not distinctly magical as redheads because they live in a world full of magical people, and most of the people there are not redheads, so it's not just red hair means magical. But I would argue that to Harry, the redheaded Weasleys are synonymous with inclusion in this world. It might be Hagrid who actually brings Harry his Hogwarts letter and tells him he's a wizard, but it's the Weasleys who literally and figuratively get him through the barrier into the magical world. Molly's the one who tells him how to get onto platform 9 3/4. She tells her kids, you know, be nice to him, be welcoming to him. She's the first person to send him a Christmas gift. Ron then sits with Harry, and through the next 7 years, it's the Weasley family who really is his main source of information about the wizarding world, about customs, sports. They take him to the Quidditch World Cup, and really anything he would need to know. It comes from the Weasleys. If Hogwarts is Harry's home, then I would argue that the Burrow is his home away from home within the wizarding world, and that when he sees Weasleys, it's time for magic. It's away from the Muggle world now. So let's talk a little bit about this idea of redheads and magic and where this came from. A lot of talk about this seems to be, oh, this is a medieval belief, this is from the Middle Ages. But most of the direct associations we have are actually post-medieval understanding of the Middle Ages. So there are a lot of urban legends of people saying, oh, witches were burnt at the stake for being redheads, supposedly. Like, that's how they knew they were a witch. Oh, redheads were persecuted, they were this, they were that. Not a ton of actual evidence that can be found for that. Seems, it's shady. So witch hunts are a big one. In this book, Malleus Maleficarum is thought of as being a real, like, witch finder's manual. And it's cited all over the place as supposedly saying that red hair and green eyes, ooh, like Lily Potter, is the sign of a witch. I can't actually find anywhere it says that, and any source that has actually gone into looking through the full thing agrees that it doesn't say that. It does mention hair in general, and that being, you know, something sexual, and women who care too much about their hair or have really glamorous hair maybe, but it doesn't specifically say anything about redheads. So this seems to maybe be a bit of an urban myth that specifically was, you know, this is the evidence that people went after redheads as witches. We can't quite be sure of that. Another one was vampires' association with blood. Before the sort of 19th century Carmilla, Dracula association of the pale skin, dark hair, there was an idea they might be gorged with blood, and that would make them ruddy in complexion as well as hair. So that association with blood was thought to be connected to redheads, and the sensitivity to the sun, so the paleness, maybe a little bit. Again, not a ton of evidence for this, but kind of floating around in the ether. Another one is pixies. I found like one folklore manual that seemed to say pixies have red hair and green eyes. So maybe that, again, all pretty nebulous and unclear. So why magic? Why is this the association? My theory is red hair is rare, and the genetic explanation was actually only discovered about 30 years ago about a mutation in the MC1R gene. It was discovered in Edinburgh, interestingly enough. And so for a long time it was just, whoa, where did that come from? Magic? Associations with the color itself, blood, fire. There's something that just has these ideas of natural world that are quite different and interesting and maybe evoke ideas of magic. And also a higher occurrence in Scotland and Ireland. So there's that othering of having come through Vikings and Danes, and those places are known for having their own fairy folklore. So maybe these things are connected. And this brings me to my next point about one very specific example, which is Sir Gawain. But I must specify this is not the Gawain of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. This is the Gawain of Le Morte d'Arthur, as reinterpreted by T.H. White in The Once and Future King. So there is no mention in Le Morte d'Arthur of Sir Gawain, who is Arthur's nephew and one of the Knights of the Round Table. No mention of him having red hair. Couldn't find it in Le Morte d'Arthur, couldn't find it in any of the other medieval sources. But T.H. White makes a point of saying numerous times throughout The Once and Future King, redheaded Gawain. We could see his red hair as he charged forth. Red hair, red hair, red hair. And there's this one line that's particularly interesting when Gawain is fighting Lancelot, that a witness says, "For I did hear tell that the old ones," which refers in that story to the Gaels or Celts people in Scotland and Ireland, "have the fairy blood in them, through the red hair, you know, madam, and this makes the laird," referring to Gawain, "as strong as 3 people before noon, because the sun fights for him." This is a rare example to me of red hair itself being a signifier of magic, because supposedly it's from fairies and there's fairy blood among people from that area, and Gawain is supposed to be from the Orkney Islands, which is off the northern tip of Scotland, and which was a strategic stronghold at the time because of Vikings and Danes and potential trade from Scandinavia, as well as potential threat of invasion. That's a really interesting one to me. And the other common example, again not mentioned at all in the medieval sources, is the sorceress Morgan Le Fay. Often portrayed, we can see on the two right-hand side, often portrayed, especially by pre-Raphaelites, with red hair. The pre-Raphaelites were kind of obsessed with red hair. These were painters in the 19th century who liked to do a lot of hyper-realistic, really lean into the beauty and romance in a lot of their paintings, and the Middle Ages were particularly popular for them. A lot of Arthurian paintings, if you just look up a painting of King Arthur, tends to be the pre-Raphaelites. They loved it. And they also really, really loved red hair, particularly for Morgan Le Fay. And also this one that Rossetti, who was obsessed with redheads, did for the Damsel of the Sanct Grail, of the Holy Grail. Again, no mention in Le Morte d'Arthur of this damsel who's one of the protectors of the Grail, this supernatural object, as having a particular color hair, but that's how he portrayed her. This is another one I like, The Last Sleep of Arthur in Avalon, which is Arthur, after being mortally wounded by Mordred, being ferried off to the magical Isle of Avalon to supposedly be healed. And it sure looks to me like at least the 2 centermost women have red hair. Again, not mentioned in the sources, but the pre-Raphaelites seem to like it. So what's the point of all this? Why does it matter that there's this history of redheads? Weasleys didn't start the fire. It was always burning since the world's been turning. So the Weasleys don't exist in a vacuum. Like many aspects of the series, they draw on a rich tradition and history that makes them all the more compelling. They might not exist as they do without the urban legends, the Victorian paintings and novels, even the 20th century cartoons. And they in turn have transformed the way redheads are viewed. They might have influenced characters like Merida in Brave. And Weasley is now a common nickname for a ginger, I say from experience. There are also various studies on stigmatization and bullying faced by redheads, but we can be proud of the Weasleys and other Potter redheads. They fulfill certain stereotypes and subvert others, but perhaps the most notable thing about them is that they're complicated, both individually and as a group. They don't have to be just one thing. They can be anything. They can fight evil, they can sometimes fail to do so, they can be star students and star athletes and dragon handlers and brave and loyal and jealous and ambitious. There are expectations when red hair is mentioned, especially as often as it is in Potter, but we can't necessarily be exactly sure what we're going to get, though we do know the results will be pretty magical. Thank you.